So let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to just stop and think for a second about a very specific feeling. You know that deep, cold, incredibly isolating sensation of carrying a long-term family grudge? It's this slow-burning mix of anger, helplessness, and just a profound sense of injustice. And usually it's born from a betrayal by someone who absolutely should have been on your side. When your world was literally burning down, they didn't bring water, they just stood on the sidelines and watched. It is honestly one of the most painful human experiences we can go through. And believe it or not, it's the exact emotional territory of the ancient texts we're breaking down today. Have you ever carried a deep grudge? And I don't mean a minor annoyance that fades away after a couple of days. I mean the deep kind, the kind that actually reshapes how you viewed the world. Look, we all carry this kind of emotional baggage at some point. But what we're going to see today is how a 2,500-year-old, frequently forgotten biblical text acts as a perfect mirror for our own modern hearts. We are diving into a text that perfectly diagnoses how an unresolved wound slowly ferments into something much, much darker. Now, it's actually staggering to realize that this entire book is only 21 verses long. It barely takes up a page, which makes it the shortest book in the entire Old Testament. Because of that, most people skip Obadiah entirely. I mean, there's no giant fish like in Jonah, there are no dramatic mountaintop showdowns, but don't let the size fool you. This tiny little book acts like a precise psychological scalpel. It beautifully, and frankly, terrifyingly, dissects human resentment, showing us exactly how unresolved pain maps onto the human soul. To really understand the depth of what's happening here, we have to trace the timeline all the way back to Genesis, around 2000 BC. We start with two brothers, Jacob and Esau. They struggled in the womb, and that rivalry basically became their entire legacy. Esau sells his birthrights, Jacob steals the blessing, and Esau is just filled with murderous rage. Fast forward centuries later, and Jacob's descendants have become the nation of Israel, while Esau's descendants have become the nation of Edom. For a long time, they managed to live in this tense, super fragile peace. But then we hit 586 BC, a catastrophic day of betrayal that changes absolutely everything and sparks the ultimate grudge. The specific Hebrew word used here is ach. Throughout the Old Testament texts, God consistently refers to Edom not as some random foreign enemy, but as brother Jacob. The word ach literally means a blood sibling, and this language, it's incredibly deliberate. The crucial takeaway here is that this isn't just some geopolitical border dispute between two neighboring nations. No, this is a family wound. And as we all know, betrayals by family cut deeper than absolutely anything else. Now, the Edomites lived southeast of the Dead Sea in a capital called Petra, which was famously carved right out of solid rock cliffs. Because of this insane geography, they were wealthy, they were secure, and they felt completely untouchable. But here's the catch. That physical security ended up producing a really deep spiritual disease. The Hebrew word for this is zed-on. It doesn't just mean arrogance. It's a dangerous presumption that actively distorts reality. Edom looked at their massive cliffs and their huge bank accounts and thought they were totally invincible. They literally asked, "Who will bring me down to the ground?" Zed-on basically became a lens that bent reality so they could only see their own superiority. Well, God's response to this pride is incredibly swift. He systematically names and dismantles every single pillar of Edom's confidence. Geography? He promises to bring them down from those impenetrable cliffs. Diplomacy? The very allies they broke bread with are going to betray and break them. Intellect? Edom was historically famous for its wise men, but God says that wisdom will perish completely. Military? Their mighty warriors will be totally dismayed. God essentially walks right through Edom's resume and stamps temporary on absolutely every single line. But, that pride was really just the foundation. What actually sealed Edom's fate was what they did on a very specific day. The Hebrew word used here is yom, meaning day. And in just 4 short verses, this word is repeated 10 times. The repetition is relentless, it's percussive and ominous. The day of his misfortune, the day of their ruin, the day of distress. This Yom was 586 BC. The Babylonian Empire attacked Jerusalem, burned the temple to the ground, and slaughtered the people. It was without a doubt Israel's darkest hour. And Edom, their brother, they had a choice to make. What follows is just one of the most carefully structured descents in all of literature. It's a terrifying 4-stage map of moral collapse, moving from passive indifference all the way to active cruelty. Stage 1, standing aloof. Edom just watched from the mountains as mere spectators. Stage 2, gloating. They looked upon the destruction with satisfaction and actually savored the ruin. Stage 3, looting. They moved in right behind the Babylonians, scavenging the wreckage and feeding on their own family. And finally, the absolute bottom, stage 4, trapping. When desperate refugees fled to Edom looking for safety with their cousins, Edom set up roadblocks and handed them right back to the killers. Now, lest we think this is just some ancient history lesson, let's think about a modern example. Consider a woman named Sarah, who went through an incredibly ugly church split. Years later, the church that split from hers imploded in this massive public scandal. Sarah found herself eagerly reading every single article, observing every little detail. She told herself she was just concerned, but she wasn't. She was in stage 2. She was quietly feeling that satisfaction, that schadenfreude over the ruin of people she used to worship with. The progression from standing aloof to gloating, it's a very real mirror to our own hearts today. And this brings us to a devastating universal principle of justice. The Hebrew verb used here is shuv, meaning to return. God tells Edom, "As you have done, it shall be done to you. Your deeds shall return on your own head." There's an incredible, tragic irony buried right here in the grammar. You see, this exact same word, shuv, is used throughout the biblical texts for repentance, returning one's heart back to God. But because Edom completely refused to make that return to God, the word now describes the exact, precise violence they permitted, perfectly boomeranging right back upon their own heads. They will drink the cup of judgment and be as though they had never been. Not just defeated, guys, but entirely erased. And this aligns perfectly with a chilling historical reality. The prophecy actually held entirely true. Over the coming centuries, the Edomites were pushed out of their secure cliffs by the Nabateans, displaced, forcibly absorbed by the Hasmonean dynasty, and eventually they vanished completely. Sure, King Herod was of Edomite descent, but the nation of Edom itself? Gone. Erased from history, exactly as the text stated. But thankfully, the story does not end on the crumbling rocks of Mount Esau. The narrative camera swings all the way across the valley to Mount Zion. Notice the stark contrast in the theological architecture of the text here. Mount Esau represents the way of the world, self-reliance, pride, banking on physical security that eventually just collapses under its own weight. But Mount Zion? That represents the way of God. It is built on dependence, humility, and eternal deliverance. On Zion, the dispossessed become the possessors, and God's restoration always exceeds the original loss. And this brings us to the absolute climax of the text. The final verse of Obadiah says, "Saviors will go up to Mount Zion." In the sweeping context of the whole biblical narrative, this directly points to Jesus, who willingly absorbed the entire Edomite playbook to finally break that cycle of vengeance. The parallels are honestly stunning. Stage 1, standing aloof. His own disciples fled and watched from a distance. Stage 2, gloating. The crowds and soldiers mocked him. Stage 3, looting. Soldiers actually cast lots for his clothes. Stage 4, trapping. Judas betrayed him with a kiss. Jesus took the boomerang of justice, that shuv, onto his own head so humanity could finally have a road back to God. So what do we actually do with this today? How do we drop our own baggage and walk off Mount Esau? Well, here are 3 incredibly practical steps drawn directly from the psychology of the text. First, name the grudge specifically. Don't be vague about it. Which of the 4 stages are you in? Name the person. Second, pray the shuv. Take that heavy debt they owe you and intentionally release it to God, the true judge. And third, do one Mount Zion act. Refuse to gloat. Send a message of compassion. Make a conscious choice to step off the mountain of pride. The kingdom is built on choices that might seem small in the moment, but are incredibly deeply rooted. Every single time you choose compassion over contempt, you are leaving one mountain for another. Obadiah might only be 21 short verses, but it completely maps out the entire human heart. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Which mountain will you choose to stand on today? Mount Esau or Mount Zion? Take a moment to really think about that. And thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.